Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried and Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
And we are back. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. You guys are fantastic, as I always say, and I'll never stop saying it because it's because of you. The show is reaching great heights, and we've had so much success. You know, I get emails and texts from people all over the world saying, you know, this person's story saved my life. This person's story, you know, made me want to be a better person. This person's story made me want to go into this type of career. And so it's amazing the influence these amazing guests that I have come on are having. And so thank you so much for sharing this. I need to give a shout out to our sponsors, Wasatch Recovery, Siegfried and Jensen, Living Recovery Interventions, First Digital, Mountain West Spine and Orthopedics, Thread Wallets, which is they're fairly new, and so thank you, Thread Wallets. They're an amazing company. And then the music you hear at the beginning, at the end, is by my good friend Paul Cardall, award-winning pianist and musician. He's amazing, and so I'm grateful to have him on my team. So today we're joined by Danny Rich. Danny, thank you for being here.
You bet. Anytime.
Yeah. Danny, he grew up here in Utah. He played sports. He played baseball, and he also played football. And he was an amazing football player. I think, if I'm correct, you are in the Weber State Hall of Fame.
That's correct. All-time leading tackler. I have two records: all-time leading tackler and most tackles in a game.
Yeah, and you still look like you're in football shape. I'm seriously, you look amazing.
Nose.
You look amazing. You also played in the United States Football League. And you've got records. You're just really good at what you do. You also, we just talked about off the air, on July 7th, he'll be 18 years clean and sober. That is an amazing feat.
Thank you.
Yeah, so congratulations on that,
Thank you so
Danny.
much.
I'm just grateful that you're here, Danny. And, you know, my cousin Corey is the one that referred you to me. So we have a mutual, you know, family member / friend. And I'm so grateful that he got us lined up and that you're willing to come here and share your story with us today.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me. Hopefully whatever I can say or sharing my story will help somebody.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that it will. And so why don't we start, Danny, with tell us. Oh, I do want to say, you're also the owner of Express Recovery. You have 80 employees. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And so, again, you're a very passionate guy. You're a very confident guy. You put your nose to the grindstone and you get things done, which, again, those are words that I heard from Corey.
Passionate, yes. Confident, that's iffy.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that. But so why don't we start? Tell us about your childhood. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Okay. So I'm the youngest of 5. I have 4 other siblings.
Okay.
My sister passed away about 2 years ago of this disease. Yes.
I'm sorry.
My father was a second counselor in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
And he smoked and drank. And my mom smoked my whole life, but I didn't even know it until I was 12. They were just too embarrassed. So our family was a lot of secrets and mysteries. And my mother, back in the day, she had depression and nervous breakdowns, and so she was hospitalized a couple times with nervous breakdowns. And my father, I was 13 years old and my father passed away. Had a heart attack. He smoked Pall Mall, no filters. He was served in World War II. So
dang.
He passed away when I was 13, and my mother, 3 months to the day, committed suicide. So I was 13 years old.
Oh my gosh, dang.
Without parents. My 19-year-old brother raised me, and back then, for whatever reason, the state of Utah or who's ever in charge didn't foster us out or anything. My brother just raised us. My aunt was our legal guardian, and she was about 2 miles away, and we'd see her maybe one time per year.
Man.
So,
So father passed away, you were 13, and then 3 years later.
3 months.
3 months.
3 months to the day.
And your mom ended her life.
Yes.
Wow.
And the weirdest thing about it is it all happened about the same time in the morning, and their bodies, when I woke up in the morning, their bodies were almost in the identical spot, which was really unusual. But my mother was, she was being treated with all the tranquilizers. So she was on Valium and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And she got to be really, really sick. And I think that that's actually what made my dad have a heart attack, just the stress of it. But
dealing with all that. And
and my mom would take me sometimes to guitar lessons, and I would wait outside for her to pick me up, and she wouldn't come, so I'd have to walk across the street to the bar to get her out to come and get me. All this stuff you think is normal when you're a kid, but when you're an adult and you have your own children, you realize, wow, that was bad.
Yeah. Because when you're growing up in it, you don't know any different. You're like, oh, this is probably what everyone's dealing with.
Yeah.
Well, and again, there's a lot here. You just shared a lot. And again, I'm sorry that you had to go through all of that. How did you handle that as a 13-year-old, losing both parents within 3 months? What was going on in your mind, if you can recall?
This is really weird to say. I was the youngest, and after my father passed, my mom got worse and worse, and my siblings would leave me, and I would have to stay home and take care of my mom. And I just remember this one experience was, I'm home with my mom, and she's on the couch, and she's maybe taking a breath every 10 seconds. Her breathing was very, very shallow. And I thought, oh my gosh, my mom is going to die. Like, what's going on right here? And so I would just have to sit and kind of babysit her. And I tried to wake her up. I tried to wake her up like 5 times, and I couldn't wake her up. So I finally called her brother, my uncle, and I said, I can't wake my mom up. And so he came down, grabbed my mom by the shoulders, shook her, slapped her in the face. She finally woke up, and he tossed her on the ground. He said, wake up, you're scaring the F out of your kid. And left her on the ground and turned and walked out. And my mom didn't talk to me for 2 weeks after I did that because she was mad at me.
She was mad that you called.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
And I'm not going to say it was devastating to lose her, but I really don't know how to explain it other than I didn't have to watch her anymore and take care of her.
And without being insensitive here, it was almost kind of like a relief that you knew that you didn't as a kid. Because how traumatic that is as a kid. I mean, it's choking me up to even think about it, to deal with seeing your mom in that state. So I could see why there was a part of you that's going, I almost felt a little bit of relief knowing that I didn't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
And thanks for putting it that way, because I don't,
Yeah.
ever want to say that, but it was almost like it was a relief because I was stuck home taking care of her.
Yeah. Wow. So so you're dealing with this, that happens, it's you and your siblings. What do you guys do at this point?
My one sister was married. My 19-year-old brother took care of me, but it was kind of nice at first. I had no one to answer to. Yeah. I slept over. I had sleepovers at my house. I didn't spend very many nights at home, and I just was free to do whatever I wanted. Were
you sad or depressed? Or were you just kind of blocking it out, do you feel? Or
I feel like I was blocking it out, and I also feel like, people in the community kind of rallied a little bit, and my friends stepped up their game, and so everybody kind of knew, and I think that my friends kind of came to my rescue, although it wasn't the right type of friends. And I got involved in sports, but I was playing sports when my parents were still alive. And that was a really good outlet. And when I was 15, I think I started smoking pot, and my brother and I would take bong hits for breakfast. We would, go to school.
You're the 19-year-old that was taking care of you?
Yes.
So he was doing it as well.
Okay. And I think I smoked pot every day of my life from 15 until I was in my 20s. I did not miss a day, except for on game days. I would always make sure I smoked after the game. I wouldn't smoke the day of the game.
So now, obviously, we talked about this in the intro. You're very excelled at sports, especially football. Were you like really dedicated at that time too, like practicing and lifting weights and making sure that you were the best you could be, despite even though you're smoking and that kind of thing?
I was always playing sports or working at it, trying to get better, lifting weights.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you said. I look back at it and just like, man, I didn't even scratch the surface of my true potential because of doing that.
Because it held you back, even though you really excelled. It could have been even further because of what you were doing.
For sure.
And that's a big message right now to our listeners because, especially with marijuana nowadays, there's the debate, is it good, is it bad, it's no big deal, it is a big deal. I mean, there's all these things. But one thing, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. So, I smoked pot for almost 9 years myself, and there's one argument I think no pot smoker can argue with, and it's this fact that pot robs you of your passion. Maybe not at first, but eventually. It keeps you from doing the things that you should be doing. Apathy becomes your passion if we habitually smoke. Even though you excelled and you're this go, nose to the grindstone guy, had you not been that, most kids, what it does is it kind of paralyzes them in the sense that they just don't do anything. What do you think of that?
I had some of my very best ideas while I was high. I never, ever followed through with one of them.
Yeah.
It's just, well, let's do this. Oh, well, let's have another bong first. Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
And then we never would get it done. And it was in the back of my mind in the late, like in the fourth quarter during a game, sometimes I would be like struggling for breath, and I think I got to quit smoking pot.
Yeah.
Like it was always something that was just like, I know my life could be better if I quit doing this, but I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it makes you lethargic and not wanting to do anything. You know, it's like you said, it stills your passion. It kind of numbs you.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so you're now living with your brother. You're smoking. You smoked into your 20s. Did that lead to other drugs and other things eventually?
Yeah. Every time, during football season, we 1 or 2 days a week. And then after the game, we'd go out and party pretty hard. And I would try cocaine a little bit during college. Not much. We couldn't afford it. But always, we would go down to the bars and, do that thing, do that whole scene. But yeah.
Yeah.
But, other than every day, I was just smoking pot every day, but I wasn't drinking it every day at that time.
At that time.
Correct.
Okay. As life was moving forward, you're living with your brother. You played baseball and football, right, in high school.
Correct.
And you get a scholarship to Weber State.
Correct.
So at that point, are you still struggling because of your past at all? Meaning, are you sad or depressed because of what you've been through? Or are you like, man, hey, I'm going to college now. I've got a scholarship. Did you feel like you kind of like, hey, I've kind of got the world where I want it right now?
I think to a point. Like I said, there was a lot of community around me, and I had a lot of support from friends and my brothers and my sisters, and they were all really happy for me getting a scholarship. I got offered from Utah State and Weber State. I really don't know why I picked Weber State. I think it was the big fish in the little pond versus the big pond and the little fish. That was what the coach said.
Okay.
But I was just focused on, playing football and being the best that I could be. And they always got a summer job. So I was always have been a hard worker, and life was good. And I got to start, my very first game I got to start in college was my freshman year. The guy that was playing in front of me was late for a team meeting, and so he got demoted.
Oh, wow.
And that's the last time he was on the field, because I finally had my opportunity to play, and we actually beat Utah State. It's the only time Weber State's ever beat Utah State in football. It would have been 1979 or 80, right around there.
Okay.
So, and then I got my opportunity, and after that it was just,
They saw what you could do. They're
Correct.
like, wow, look at this guy.
I was ready
he's
for
now
the
going to be our
opportunity.
starter.
Yep, I was ready for the opportunity.
Wow. What position?
So I played outside linebacker.
Okay.
And then my senior year, they moved me to inside linebacker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that had to feel good knowing that, man, now I'm starting freshman
Yes.
year. I mean, that's
Mhm.
pretty impressive.
And, you know, still back to, you know, kind of the weed thing is just like, oh my gosh, like it could be better if I just quit this, but I just couldn't put it down. I
Yeah.
just could not do it.
Yeah.
And I got good grades. And I think maybe if something would have started to go bad, it may have prompted me into doing that,
Yeah.
but everything was going good.
Seemed to be going in a good direction
Correct.
at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you end up having like I said, you made it to the Weber State Hall of Fame, which is, I mean, that's not an easy thing to do.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Thank
It
you.
really truly is amazing. Did you ever think of that when you were playing? Like, okay, I'm going to one day be in the Weber State Hall of Fame?
No, that never came to mind.
Yeah. But how does that feel now knowing that you accomplished that?
I think it's pretty cool. I really, you know, it's kind of nice to have a record that no one's beat, and it's been 1981, 19. It's like a 40-something-year-old record.
Is that the one most tackles in a single game?
Most tackles in a game, and I'm still the all-time leading tackler at Weber State.
Wow.
And
That
so
is
having
so
that
cool.
record, I think that means more to me than the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, and again, especially with what you'd gone through as a child, to be able to go through, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. A lot of times when someone like yourself goes through, losing both parents at such a young age, and not only losing them, but dealing with seeing them suffer as a child, which is traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times kids in your situation become a statistic. You know, you end up, yes, you were smoking pot, but yet you were still getting good grades, going to school, you earned a scholarship. But most kids go the complete other direction. They start doing every drug under the sun. They get in trouble with the law. They get arrested. They go to detention. Eventually they end up in jail. You could have easily gone down that road. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This is why it's so impressive that despite what you went through, on some level, in a big way, you excelled above and beyond what was expected.
Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate you saying that. That's nice.
yeah. I see this all the time. This is what I deal with clients. I see it every day.
Yeah.
And so to hear someone, so as you move forward, so you're done with Weber State, you played in the U.S. How do you say it? The
United States Football League.
United
Played
States
for the
Football
Los
League.
Angeles Express.
Okay. How was that?
Interesting experience. I played 3 years. And I guess it's known for, like, Steve Young
Yeah.
was on our team, and he signed a $40 million contract. And I think the best part of it was the men that I met. I met some really good men. I met some not so good men. But just the camaraderie,
Sure.
that's always really, really good. At the time, so I got married when I was 22. I married a girl named Jody Bergman,
Okay.
and we had a daughter, and her name's Amber Bell now. She's since been married.
Okay.
But once I had my child, football became different to me. I didn't want to risk my body anymore for whatever reason. I just thought, God, I got to be able to enjoy my daughter, and so it, for whatever reason, it made me. I think I lost my edge a little bit. I used to think, get me a job, making good money, and I would quit this stuff in a heartbeat. College was so fun, but once I was playing professionally, it just got to be a job, and they treated you differently.
Yeah.
And they didn't care about you. If you were hurt, they would just bring somebody else in. So you didn't want to be hurt, because if they did, then somebody might take your job. And
Yeah. So
it's
you would
just
have to
week
pay
to
through
week.
pain when you probably shouldn't be.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Hurting your body.
Yeah, correct. And
Yeah.
and so it just it changed everything for me for whatever reason. And I did play 3 years. When I came out of college, I had some neck issues. I actually signed originally with the Denver Broncos, and they released me before I even practiced because I had a pinched nerve C6 and C7.
Oh man.
And they had somebody that had just ended up suing them over the exact same thing. They're just like, we're not going to take a chance on you. And then luckily the USFL came along and did a tryout at Viewmont High School, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And ran for a guy, and he said, like, I'll sign you. And just went there, and it was cool. It was also really neat traveling around the country. We played in New Jersey and Oakland and Denver and Birmingham, Alabama, and Jacksonville. And so it was fun.
Yeah.
That part.
So when you had your daughter, you decided you were going to maybe get out of there and do something different.
Mm-hmm.
At this time, are you still struggling with substance abuse and things like that? Is it getting worse at this point, or, take us to where that was starting to lead you?
So I'm still smoking pot at the time, and we would same thing, 2-3 times a week we'd go out and have beers and with the teammates, and then that's when I started to do cocaine a little bit more. I would go over to, I remember, we had a lot of guys on our team that made a lot of money, and we had a particular person that from USC that got a lot of money. I remember going over to his house, and he had a paper plate on his table, and I don't even know how much cocaine it was, but it was a pile of cocaine. And
Jeez.
He would take a cigarette and break off the end of it and suck it up in the cigarette, and so that probably, my frequency of my cocaine use probably was up at that time. Maybe once every couple weeks or once a month, but I never would go out and buy it or anything. If somebody had it, I would share with them. Yeah.
So are things getting out of control at this point with substance abuse and things like that? No,
not out of control. Everything.
you're still, and what I mean by that is you're still functioning and getting things done that you need to.
Correct.
And that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To a point, right?
Yes, to a point, as well as you can. Obviously not as good. That's the thing, is your mind is so powerful, and my mind has tricked me for the majority of my life, telling me, things that aren't true about myself. I can do this, or I deserve this, or I'm entitled to this. Look how hard I work. And then you have those entitlement issues. Well, I deserve to do this on this night, or I deserve not to be home with my wife and my kids. And because I work so hard or whatever. And so that's when my entitlement issues really started.
Okay. And talk about that a little bit more, because I agree with you. Our minds are so powerful, both positively and negatively. And I really, in the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, he basically says, and I'm summarizing this, he says the number one cause of human suffering is our own thinking, and when we feel entitled, like, I deserve this, I do, you're putting yourself in danger and putting yourself at risk of, you easily could have, overdosed or died, or all kinds of things that could have happened. So talk about that, like this, how your mind was really, you were wrestling with the narrative, I guess.
Well, and I think I touched on it a little bit, is just, there was something always in the back of my mind when I would get tired or in the fourth quarter, like, why am I partying still? Or all these little things that, I shouldn't have went out last night. And, we always had a curfew at 10 o'clock when we would go out of town to the games, and sometimes we would sneak out. And I remember one time we were playing in San Antonio, and it was in June, and there was about 10 of us, we all snuck out and went out after bed check, and got drunk the night before a game, which I don't think I've ever done before. And I just remember going down on the field, and it was like hotter than heck and humid. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And I just remember looking around at the guys that I went out with and partied, and they were just like sitting there shaking their heads. And it's just, you got a game that day, and you're going to go out and do that the night before the game. It's just It's not smart.
Right. Yeah. So at this point, does your wife know that you're partying like this? Does she?
Yes.
Is she concerned? Are you guys talking about it? Are you trying to hide it from her? What's going on with that?
So I've always hid my marijuana use from her. I think she knew, and we would talk about it, and she could smell it on me sometimes. I'd say, yeah, I would smoke with these guys or whatever, but she no way approved of it, no way agreed with it. Was very disappointed in me when I did it.
Yeah. So we mentioned in the beginning you're coming up on 18 years of being clean and sober, which again is amazing. What led up to you stopping and quitting and getting your life away from that kind of thing? Did something happen? Talk about that for a minute.
Okay. So I have 3 kids total. I have Amber that I've talked about. And I have a son named Andrew and a son named Austin. I also, with my new wife, I have a stepdaughter, Tasia.
Okay.
And I think what led up to it is I got into cocaine really bad with the place where I used to work.
Okay.
I was doing it every day. And I went into treatment the very first time. I think would have been in 1996, and just cocaine had overtaken my life and my thoughts and everything involved around getting, consuming, buying, snorting, partying, cocaine. And so I went into treatment the first time, and that was at the old Doxy Hatch, which was on 39th, right over by St. Mark's.
Doxy Hatch.
And I got sober, and I went to the gym. After I got out of treatment, I went to the gym, and I asked a guy I knew who was an alcoholic, and asked him to be my sponsor. And he's like, "You go to AA meetings?" He goes, "AA meetings just make me want to drink." So I wouldn't do that. And that's what I needed to hear. So I didn't go to AA meetings. I didn't change my behaviors. I didn't change my friends. I didn't change anything. I was the designated driver now. And, if you go to the barbershop enough times, pretty soon you're going to get a haircut. So I stayed sober, white knuckle, no meetings or anything for 4 years. And then I had a friend that was playing the NFL, and we all went out of town to watch him play. And one of my friends had some cocaine. And I was just drinking again, little bits at a time, and I did some cocaine with him, and that just started me down the darkest road in the history of dark roads.
Yeah.
So I used for a long time, and I didn't go to the gym, because I go to the gym every day. I didn't go to the gym for about 1.5 years, and I would see people at the store that would see me, and they would say, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? Do you have cancer?" Like, physically, I just changed. People couldn't even recognize me, and then I became isolated. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want anybody to see me. I would just, it was awful. Anyway, my wife at the time, it was the 4th of July, and I came home, and I was getting in the shower, and I was taking off my clothes, and my bag of cocaine fell on the ground.
Oh, man.
And the biggest act of love ever in the history of acts of love, she kicked me out.
Yeah.
Sorry. So this lady was my high school sweetheart, and she tried so hard, and she would do everything for me. And it was probably the hardest thing that she's ever done. And at the time, and for the next year, I was angry about it. But now it was just such an act of love.
Yeah.
She saved my life.
Yeah.
So she kicks me out on the 4th of July, and I go to a friend's house. I told her I'm going into rehab again. I go to my friend's house. We get a bunch of cocaine, and we step for 2 days straight. So July 7th is my son's birthday. That's how selfish and self-centered I become, is I hadn't slept for 2 days before. So I called my wife, and I said, "Can I come home and see my son Austin?" And she's like, "Sure." So I come home. It's about 9 a.m, and my kids are just really upset with me, as their father. And my son, who it's his birthday, I say, "Hey, happy birthday, son." He's at the computer, and he acknowledges me. And I say, "Well, I'm going to just go lay down for a second." So I went and lay down in our bed. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. And the next thing I know, I woke up at 3 a.m, and my wife had called my siblings and said, "Please come get your brother. He needs help." So they piled me in their car, and I went to LDS Hospital. That was the last time I spent the night in my house. So I was completely out. I detoxed at the hospital, and then I entered a program called Dayspring. I was living with my sister in a really small room, and she was married with kids and 2 dogs. So I had the room with the dogs.
Wow.
And that started my journey in recovery.
Wow. That had to have felt really defeating, knowing that kind of how your kids were viewing you at the time and seeing you on that birthday just passed out in the bed. That had to have been a really tough thing to accept, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't, you become so selfish and so self-centered. Like, is that even a thought in your head at that time? It's just like, oh my gosh, I have to quit doing drugs now. You're just thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about your children or the impact that you're having on their lives. Thank goodness it's not like that today. But I just had become such a narcissist and so self-centered that it was just everything was about me, and I wasn't even thinking about them.
Yeah.
Now I do, and now I've had some on again, off again relationships with my daughter. We went 5 years without even talking because she just couldn't quite forgive me, I don't think, and that's okay. I had a guy in AA. I was complaining about that situation with him, and he said, after all the stuff you've done in your life, your daughter, you don't deserve to ever to be talked to again. If she talks to you ever again, you're lucky. So now that we have a good relationship.
Yeah.
So I am lucky.
Yes,
I am lucky.
Yeah. Wow. What a story, man. That's unbelievable. So 18 years on July 7th, so you turn your life around, you start doing the right things, you start getting help and getting better. What did you start doing at that point? I mean, we talked about at the beginning, you're the owner of Express Recovery. When did that come into fruition for you, or were you doing other things before all that?
So I owned Express Recovery at that point in time.
Oh, at that point. Okay.
And it was almost out of money, almost out of everything. I would just, I'm just lucky to still even have my business. But I'll just talk a little bit about, and I hope this is okay to share, but this is kind of my spiritual awakening, or what
absolutely.
happened.
You share what this is your story.
Changed my life.
Please.
So my best friend at the time, so no one would really talk to me except for my siblings. So my wife had kicked me out of the house, and I'd made a lot of enemies. My best friend, who's always been by my side, is my son, Andrew. And so he would have been, at the time, he was 18 going on 19.
Okay.
And I was living at my sister's. He would come and pick me up in Clinton, drive me to AA in Salt Lake, wait for me, pick me up, drive me back, and then drive home back to Ogden. So he was living with his mom in Ogden at the time. And this is all during high school, and he played sports. And so he just was literally my best friend.
Wow.
About, I'm going to say, he turned 19 in September and went on an LDS mission.
Okay.
And so here was my best friend, the person that was by my side is now gone.
Right.
And have you heard of Halt? So in recovery, or in Dayspring, they taught us about HALT. It stands for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. You want to try to avoid those 4 things. So at the time, my son had been out on a mission. He was in Portland, Oregon. He was probably out about 4 or 5 months at the time.
Yeah.
And I had just gotten in a huge fight with my business partner at work, so I was super angry.
Yeah.
The night before, my wife at the time, soon to be ex-wife, had just taken all my stuff out of the house and threw it on the yard of my new house where I was staying.
Oh, man.
And it was raining. I was looking out the window just crying.
You're like, oh no.
I was super lonely.
Yeah.
Like very lonely early in recovery. It's just, I was just really, really lonely. My son was gone and tired. I wasn't hungry, so I was 75% of hungry, angry, lonely, tired. which they told me to avoid. So I got in a fight with my business partner. It would have been about 3 p.m. And I came home, and on the way home, I says, I'm going to call. And I'd been sober for 5 or 6 months at the time. I'm going to call my dealer.
Yeah.
So I get home, I punch the number in my phone, I get ready to hit send. And one thing I learned in treatment was pause and pray. And so I just thought, I'm going to try this. Never gotten on my knees to pray in my life.
Right.
And I just said, God, I'm begging you, please help me change my life. Like, I want to change my life. Please help me. And nothing happened. No relief. I must have said 50 prayers that night.
Yeah.
Just help me, God. Please help me. Like, I don't want to, I just could not get rid of this angst. And never in my life has anything ever stopped me once I've made the decision to use. That day I made that decision I was going to use, except for I paused and I prayed. And so finally it gets to be about 9:00 at night. And I just think, okay, I'm going to go to bed. I made it through today. If I feel this way in the morning, I'll call him in the morning. But when tomorrow comes, it's going to be today. All we have to do really is stay sober for 24 hours.
Yeah.
So I get into bed and my phone rings. It's an unidentified call, which I never, ever, ever answer.
Yeah.
And I answer it. And it's my son that's on a mission in Portland, Oregon. And it was at the time when missionaries couldn't call home ever.
Right. You never heard from him unless Christmas or Father's Day.
Mother's Day.
Or Mother's
Day. They don't let
him
call it Father's
right.
Day.
You're right. That's right. The dad's got the shaft.
Yeah. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, Dad, I've had this feeling all day that you're in trouble. Are you okay?
Oh, man.
And they teach you before your kids go on a mission to never say anything negative. Always tell them everything's okay. And I said, yes, son, everything's fine. What's up? And he goes, I just had this feeling. And I went and talked to my stake president. And he said that I could call you. And I said, everything's fine. He said, okay, I'll talk to you later. Boom. And hung up. That was the end of the conversation. But man, it's just like, at that moment, I knew God knows me.
Mm-hmm.
He loves me. He wants me to be happy, healthy, and free. Like, I have the most powerful person in the universe that knows me.
Wow.
I broke 9 of the 10 commandments. Like, seriously, like I'm nothing. I'm nothing. But he wants to help me.
Mm-hmm.
That changed my life. At that point, I hadn't been to church. I mean, once my son started going to mission, I would go every once in a while. But then I started to read scriptures. I started to go to church. I started to, I wanted to know more about this person that knows me.
Yeah.
Because he reached out to me and I want to know more about him.
Yeah. And
it changed my life. And I'm sorry that I get emotional. It's really hard to talk about.
Don't be sorry. This is great.
But I never told my son that story until the day he got married. And we were at his dinner. And it's interesting to hear his side of it.
Yeah.
Because I've never heard his side of it. I never ever once talked to him about it. I'll tell you kind of a little bit about his psyche, what I had done to him. So I went to pick him up from his mission. And at the time, I'm divorced. So my ex-wife's in another room. I'm in a room. My son's up talking to me. We're picking him. We're going home. And I said, I'm going to run down and get a cup of coffee. And he's like, okay. So I leave the room. And I come back. I forgot something. And I'm like, oh, I forgot my wallet. So I come back in my wallet. My son was going through my luggage. That's how much mistrust my family had for me.
Yeah.
But this is today. He's a bishop. He's actually my bishop.
Oh man, what are the odds, right?
What are the odds of that? So anyway, I
Oh,
became
my
active.
gosh.
I became active member
Okay.
of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and
That's awesome.
when the pandemic hit, so I'm a 3-time-a-week AA guy.
Mm-hmm.
The best thing that I've done since I've been sober is I worked 8 years as a step leader at Dayspring.
Okay.
Volunteer work. I would come in, and on Tuesday nights I would take alcoholics and drug addicts through the first 3 steps of the big book of AA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was just so powerful, and it
Mhm.
was so good for my sobriety. Like, I've just had all these things fall into place to help keep me sober.
Yeah. Wow.
Crazy.
That is crazy, but crazy beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what a story. And it's interesting. I think a good lesson for all of us, and I love what you shared. A lot of times, if not almost every time, when we say a prayer, it's usually answered through another person. And I think sometimes we might expect this big shining light in the room, and not saying that can't happen either, but most of the time what I have found, even in my own prayers, is it's usually answered through someone else reaching out to me going, hey, I felt something, I needed to reach out to you. And a lot of times we'll deny it. I'm good, like you did. I'm fine, son. Thanks for calling. And then you hang up going, whoa, And so, no, I think that's a really powerful, oh, wow, what a story. Man, you have lived quite the life and been through so much. And I'm glad to hear that you're back in good gracious with your children, and you're now remarried, correct?
Remarried, yes.
So
I have a lovely wife, Rebecca, and she's so
awesome.
She's so supportive and loving.
That's great. And I just love how dedicated you are with with your sobriety and making sure you're doing the things you need to be doing. And I love that.
Yeah.
One of the things I love out of the big book, it says faith without works is dead. So the opposite must be true. Faith with works must be alive.
It's really good.
And I've always looked at it that way. It's like, and here you are exercising faith by putting in the work. Therefore, it's alive in you. I can see it in you. You're like, you got a good countenance about you. You know what I mean? Like you truly can see that. And it's because of that faith that you have in all of this. And what a beautiful story.
Hey, thank you. That's really nice.
Yeah.
I've learned all these little acronyms in AA and in treatment, but the one that came to my mind that night was PUSH.
Yeah.
And it stands for pray until something happens.
Mm.
And that's what I did. And it's like you said, I've read your book, and I take my family every year. We go to Punta Mita, Mexico, and I read your book, and my wife looks over and is like, what is wrong with you? Like, I'm literally bawling right next to the pool. And I said, our stories are so similar.
They really are.
They're so similar. And, I didn't give all my money to any girl at a lemonade stand.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that. It's just, these little things that happen. And they say that God works in mysterious ways, and maybe the way that he answers are very mysterious, but it's not very much of a mystery. You just have to ask for help and be sincere about it, and put in the work, like you said, to try to change your life. And we all go through challenges or trials, and I know you talked a lot about this, about being a victim in your book, and man, that's just, if you have that victim mentality, you don't have a chance to ever get sober.
Yeah.
You really don't.
Yeah, you stay stuck.
You stay stuck.
Yeah. The opposite of victim stance is accountability. And I know when I started taking accountability for my life is when things started to change and my suffering stopped.
Mm-hmm.
When we play victim, our suffering perpetuates. It continues. And so, very well spoken, very well said. A question, kind of a last question for you, Danny. If there's someone listening to you right now who's struggling, they're in a dark place, what would you tell that one person right now? You've already said some amazing things, but
I think the most powerful thing that's happened to me is when you know that God knows you, and if you're out there and you feel like he doesn't know you, trust me, he does. He really does. And he wants us all to be healthy, happy, and free. And when I worked a lot at Dayspring, the place that I went, I would say 20% of the people that came in there, they didn't believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me so sad. And I wasn't sad for them and I wasn't mad because they didn't believe in what I believed. I was sad because they're missing out on such a beautiful thing. Like, how could you not tap into that?
Yeah.
And I also found, Todd, that the higher educated the people were, the less likely they were to believe in God. And I don't know why that is, but doctors, pilots would come in there. If you couldn't see it, smell it, touch it, then it can't be true.
Yeah.
But you just have to have faith.
Yeah.
You really have to have faith.
And it takes a lot of humility.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we're more educated, I think what happens is we know a lot.
Yeah.
I know more than this kind of thing. And so, that can be a challenge for a lot of people. But it's great to see you where you're at and how you've handled that. And that's great advice for someone who is struggling. And you've already, all these great things you've already shared. So
Well, get on your knees and say a prayer.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Wow. Well, I mean, you're not a social media guy.
On purpose. I have addictive personality.
Yeah.
I don't do that on purpose.
I mean, normally what I do at the end of these, I go, well, if someone wants to reach out to you, how do they find you on social media? And you're like, well, there isn't any. But if someone did want to reach out to you, could they send you an email? Would you be comfortable sharing that with our listeners?
You bet.
What's your email, Danny?
So my email address is drich, RICH, at expressrecovery.com. EXPRESSRECOVERY.com.
Beautiful.
And I'm sorry I don't have social media, but addictive personalities and social media don't
Matter
go
of fact,
on.
I actually envy you. I have it because of my business and I promote on there and stuff. But when I hear you say that, I'm like, man, I wish that was me. I really do. And I think that's great that that would open a door for you that you don't want to go down. You don't even want to risk it. That's you putting in the work. That's the faith you're talking about. So congrats to you on that.
Well, and my wife's on Twitter, and when she's on Twitter a lot, she gets super ornery. I'm like, wow, I do not want to be this way.
Yeah, no,
she
I hear
just
you.
fights with people online. I'm like, why do you even care? Like, it just makes no sense.
It can cause a lot of issues, but well, hey, Danny, this has been such a pleasure to be sitting here with you face to face, and hearing your story. And
I have a lot of. Like I said, I read your book, and
that means a lot.
Man, it really touched me, and I'm so grateful for you and what you're doing to help people, and
thank you,
and your sober community and all the work that you put in, and
thank you.
It's so awesome.
Thank you. That means a lot, and I'm grateful for Corey who got us lined up, and it's really a pleasure to have you on, and I know that people listening to this have really gotten a lot out of this.
Good.
Saving lives, man.
Good.
I really believe that.
Well, do you still play basketball? Could you think you could take a 61-year-old man in the post?
I don't know. You're built pretty good. I could probably shoot a jump shot over you. I don't know about posting you up, but I could try. But no, that's great. I thank you for being on, and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, folks, there you are. I told you this was going to be another great episode, and it did not disappoint whatsoever. Danny Rich, what an amazing story. If you're struggling, you think you can't overcome, Danny's living proof that you can. And we just have to exercise that faith, humble ourselves a little bit, and if not a little bit, a lot, but it's worth it, and you guys can overcome this. Please reach out to Danny, send him an email. I'll have the email in the show notes that you'll be able to just click on, and you can go right to and send him a question if you have one. And if you have a question and you can't get a hold of him, reach out to me, and I'll send it on to Danny for you, and we'll make this happen. If you have someone who's struggling with addiction, with depression, anxiety, whatever it may be, or if they're even struggling with a higher power, send them this episode because it'll break the ice. And when they hear Danny's words around all of that, they'll be like, wow, if this big, tough NFL linebacker can do this, we all can. So awesome. I love you guys. And until next time.